Hi guys! Earlier, we just have an online conversation with Regina's city manager on the city's pandemic response. It's really nice to know how the city was well organized and prepared in response to COVID-19. The city manager is talking about the next normal or the new normal, where we are expecting changes on how the city delivers its services. It's interesting to note that there are already talks across Canada the 4-day week work, and others may be permanently working at home. Watch the conversation and learn from Regina, Canada City Manager. Thanks for watching.
People questions, because I'm sure that's what staff want to know about. How does this impact them? So I do want to just start by highlighting that we've had 2 sessions this week with directors and managers, and we have 3 sessions with employees, 2 today and 1 tomorrow. So those that were able to join us today, I thank you for taking the time out of your schedules. What's a little unique about today is we also invited City Council. We invited our union association leaders. So I think there's an opportunity today to really have a great conversation and for you to ask some questions. And depending on those questions, we might ask others to participate in the discussion as well. So I also just want to highlight that, first of all, a big thank you to everybody. We are in unprecedented times. COVID-19 and this pandemic has changed not only how we work, it's changed how we live. It's changed what we can and cannot do. And I think Regina has been very responsible and very successful in terms of making sure that we've been able to flatten that curve. That is the language that we started out with early. And of course, we've done a great job of physical distancing, and we have no active cases in Regina. So I think that's something that we should all feel very, very proud of, and I think it makes our community safe. I also just want to highlight things that we're normally doing as an organization, and this is just one example of how things are being done differently. So, we're coming to the end of National Indigenous History Month, and we had a partnership with the Regina Public Library, and we've done some activities, but everything has more or less been done virtually. Also, it's Pride Month, and of course, the parade and festival were postponed until the fall, but June is a very important month around those 2 events. Also, this is the time that we would be having our employee appreciation barbecue. And of course, we're not having the barbecue because of the requirements in terms of the size of public gatherings and the need to physical distance. So we're going to be looking for new ways to reach out to employees and celebrate our success. So I want to start just in terms of, it's 100 days last Friday since we started to respond to COVID-19. And one of the first things that we did was we activated our Emergency Operations Center. And that center then brought leadership across the organization together to respond to the public health orders. And the public health orders have really driven the actions that the city has taken. So, very early we had to shut down our recreation facilities, for example. And that was all based on not being able to have people together in a space. The other thing that we did is we shut down a lot of our administrative offices. So at City Hall, the Transit Service Center, our Transit Admin office, our cemetery offices, our 4th Avenue offices, and we sent a lot of employees that were able to work remotely. They worked from home. We also had a lot of other employees that, didn't have that ability because obviously you're frontline and you're delivering services to residents. So, for example, transit. Transit is an area where, we reduced our transit service because we wanted to make sure that we could keep not only the public safe, but most importantly, we could keep our transit operators safe. So we did initiatives through support of council and approval of council to waive transit fees. And we had people board through the back of the bus so that we eliminated that direct contact with fare boxes, reduced contact, and protected the drivers. But it's been uncomfortable for many, many people in terms of, when you work in an office environment and, there was still a handful of people that needed to be at City Hall. But for the most part, when you work in that environment, you know who your colleagues are. You talk to each other about your health and how you're feeling. But when you're out in the field, so whether you're driving that bus or whether you're interacting with citizens as they are talking to you about whether you're working in a park doing maintenance or whether you're fixing a water main or you're fixing a sewer pipe, etc., doing road work, there's interactions with the public. And so, I always use transit as the example. As the people board the bus, the transit driver does not get a medical history of what's the status of those individuals. How are they feeling? Are they experiencing symptoms? Have they just traveled? Have they come in contact with someone? So really want to send a huge appreciation to those people that, have not had the luxury to work from home in the comfort of their home, and really have had to put yourself at a little bit of risk and, a little bit of exposure, if I can use those words. And at the end of the day, the city has done a fantastic job in that we have continued to deliver all of the services that we deliver. And with the exception of those facilities that we chose to close as a requirement of the public health order. So I think that says a lot about our organization and our ability to respond fairly quickly. We have leveraged technology, and we've been able to do a lot of our meetings, conduct a lot of our business through technology and remotely. And, just like this meeting is being held through Microsoft Teams, just a fact the other day that Louise shared with me, we were over 13,000 individual team meetings. So that just, is an indication of just how well we've done in terms of adapting to, technology. And the city, again, we made some decisions a number of years ago to invest and with Microsoft Office and Microsoft in the cloud. So that's what enabled a lot of our staff to be able to access files remotely. So we positioned ourselves for this type of technology a number of years ago. And of course, COVID-19 is something that gave us the opportunity and really required us to head in a direction where we really started to make full utilization of the technology. And, one of the things that we talk about often is bringing employees back to work and what does that look like? We continue to try and respect, individual health of individuals. Obviously, if someone is immunocompromised, then, we're not going to make them come back to work. There are limitations and restrictions about the number of people that we can have in the workplace. So some of our work environments, we can only bring back about 50% of the people that we would normally have in an office space. So, we are going to continue to communicate about the return of employees and the timing of that in terms of returning people to the workplace. We are going to take a very cautious and, planful approach. It is probably going to be the end of the summer into September before we're at a point maybe where we have 50% of our staff back in the workplace. And until the health orders are lifted, the emergency situation is declared ended, and that probably won't happen until we actually have either a vaccine or a drug therapy that gives us all confidence that COVID-19 is somewhat under control. So one of the really important things is how well have we communicated. And of course, we're a fairly large organization, and often we get criticized, I think, for not communicating enough, not communicating in a timely manner, or not communicating as frequent as we need to. So one of the things that we did was we undertook a survey in terms of the pandemic, and it was available from May 19th to May 26th, and I think you can see some high-level results on the screen in front of you. At the end of the day, we had about a 48% response rate. We have 2,700 employees. At the end of the day, we had 982 employees respond, but we didn't have the ability to get the survey out to all of our employees. So 48% is obviously not, we had 982 employees. That's not 48% of 2,700, but that's 48% of the people that we were able to send the survey to. And we asked a couple of questions, or a couple of topics or areas of discussion. One was around engagement, and one was around the direct response to COVID-19. And, the engagement questions really, I think, reinforce just what a great organization we have. 88% of people said they're very proud of the work they do. 84% said they're very committed to the organization. And 77% said, taking everything into account, I like working at the organization. And then 74% that I'm very proud of the products and services that the organization provides. So I know that many of you know that as city manager, I've worked for this organization for a number of years. I think it's about 42 now. And I can tell you one of the things that I've always been proud of, and one of the things that drives me, is I work with great people. And, I'm going to say the majority of employees that work for the city, they care about their community and they want to give back. So these results on engagement, just for me, really confirm the type of people we have that work in our organization, and that we care about our community, we care about each other, and it matters in terms of the quality and the level of services that we deliver. The other piece is right around the response that we had for COVID-19. And 78% of folks said, support the overall response to COVID-19. 71%, they receive regular and meaningful communication about how that impacts their work. And 70% say, yeah, I believe that the actions and the direction that was taken was supporting the health and well-being of our employees. There's one area which is around senior management relationships, and this is specific to the executive leadership team. And that is that 51% of the organization understood the rationale behind most of the business decisions that were made by the members of ELT. So, ELT has had a preliminary conversation about that. That's concerning to us as a team, because at the end of the day, our success is really about making sure that all of our employees, from myself as city manager, down to those employees that are on the front line working directly with the public, it's really important that everyone understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we're going to work on that to make sure that the communications are timely and that they're clear, so that the communications that come from, whether it's ELT, whether it's the directors, the managers, supervisors, crew leads, etc., that full explanations are being provided, and you're having an opportunity to enter into some discussions. And people say, in terms of their managers, that the manager has kept them fairly well informed, and that the manager cares about them as a person. So when I see those results, and I look at the fact that there's not an understanding of the rationale behind the decisions that ELT made, then obviously ELT has some work to do, because the managers are clearly communicating with people. And then, of course, around employee empowerment, it's always important that we're giving our employees the tools they need to do their job, and that, it's clear in terms of, as we've adjusted our business and made changes, that people understood what was expected of them. And, those two scores are 66 and 79%. So at the end of the day, I think this is a fairly positive survey in terms of some of the results. But as we discussed at ELT, we can pat ourselves on the back, but then we quickly have to turn our attention to how do we get better, how do we improve, what do we need to do differently, so that, when we ask these questions, that we can even have stronger results than we had here. So commitment of myself and the other ELT members is that we're going to work very hard with our core team, which is our directors and some of our business support managers and a few other key positions in the organization, to make sure that we're communicating effectively with you, and that we're hearing the feedback as well in terms of what you need as employees. So, just in terms of our Reopen Regina plan. So, obviously our commitment is, we had to lay a number of employees off, especially when we closed recreation facilities. We redeployed some staff, and, we worked very well with union leadership and our association's leadership to make that happen. This is a difficult situation, but I think the dialogues and the conversation has achieved some fairly positive results. Everything we've done, as I said earlier, has been in alignment with the public health orders, and now, of course, the Reopen Saskatchewan plan. So, the Chief Medical Officer and the Ministry of Health make decisions on when things can open and when things can, go back to normal, or what the new guidelines are in terms of making sure things, can open. So things like, we've opened up City Hall. We have some limited counter service. We've opened up our transit administrative office on 11th Avenue. We've opened up the chapel at the Secretary and our administrative offices. Of course, this week we've opened up spray pads. We've opened up athletic fields. Just yesterday, Council made a decision that we will open up outdoor pools. We'll open up Regent, and that'll open on July 17th. And then, of course, we're waiting for approval to open our indoor recreation facilities. So we're hoping that by early July we'll be able to open up, the Northwest Leisure Center, the Lawson Aquatic Center, and then the Schmerler Center fairly quickly after that. We've done things like reintroduced parking meter fees downtown, because as businesses started to come back online, obviously we needed to get people coming downtown, but also get people moving. And we had a situation where people would park at a parking meter all day because we weren't requiring any fees, and we weren't enforcing. And then, of course, I've talked briefly about the return to the physical workplace. We're going to take a very gradual approach, and we'll be communicating in full detail with everybody around what that looks like. And we're engaging the directors and the managers in terms of, as we bring people back, who are the critical people that we need in our work locations. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there will probably be staff that can perform their functions remotely, and they may only have to go to an office environment on a very seldom or occasional basis. And we may have some that never have to come back to an office environment because they can effectively perform their functions at home. So we're going to continue to communicate as much as we possibly can. We're not out of this yet. There's lots of, second wave activity in a number of communities around the world. So I think, Canada has to remain vigilant and cautious in terms of making sure that we continue to flatten that curve, and that we don't see a significant spike in the other direction. And maybe before we open for questions, I'm just going to have Barry talk briefly just about, obviously, with the stopping of some programs, the elimination of fees, and the closing of facilities. It's had an impact on our budget, and will have an impact on our financial position for some time to come. So I'm just going to ask Barry to walk through that at a fairly high level, just so that you have a sense of how this will impact us as an organization moving forward.
Good afternoon. So as some of you might know, we have taken reports to Council to give them an update on the impact COVID-19 is having on city operations from a financial perspective. And so we developed a couple of scenarios initially, earlier in April, and we projected that the impact would be between $12 million and $20 million. So basically COVID-19 would result, if we did nothing, result in a deficit for the city between $12 and $20 million. But as a city, we need to find ways to balance our budget. So when we went to City Council, we also went and proposed a number of actions that would allow us to find savings elsewhere to offset those financial impacts. And so, they range from pieces like freezing vacant positions unless they're frontline or critical positions, as well as looking at other areas in our budget where we could freeze or reduce the budget this year to make up that difference. I think the real challenge is, as Chris has indicated here, that the reason we're seeing this financial impact is because we're not seeing the type of revenues we had originally budgeted. Transit, for example, for a period of right now, transit fares, we're not collecting transit fares. Obviously, with our rec facilities not being open, we don't have things like the leisure pass revenues, etc. And so we are seeing those type of revenue impacts. I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that I think the impacts of COVID-19 are going to be around for a while, as Chris mentioned, until a vaccine's found or there's an effective drug therapy. And so we're likely to see these impacts continue into 2021, even if the province allows, for example, the example I like to use is no restrictions on the number of people in a bus. There still will be people until we see effective medical treatment for the disease. There still will be people reluctant, for example, then to get on a bus that perhaps they were taking transit prior to COVID-19. So we think it'll be a while before we get back to how things used to be from a financial perspective, and that's something that we as an organization will just need to continue to manage through over this year, and I anticipate into next.
Thank you, Barry. So there was supposed to be a prompt that asked you to submit questions, and I don't think it's shown up for you. So I would ask that if you have questions, if you can submit them, then we'll have Louise kind of moderate and just ask those questions. So if any of you have questions, please submit them. And Louise, do we have any questions that just generally you think our employees may want to have some information about? But please go ahead and ask questions through the chat feature if you can.
Yeah, so while people are submitting their questions through the chat, Chris, I know one of the questions that came up earlier in the week when you met with managers and directors was a question around what has changed permanently for the City of Regina or the community because of COVID-19.
You know, I think the one thing that we can say at this point has changed permanently is the fact that we all, whether you're the City of Regina, whether you're a private business, is that everyone is going to look at how they deliver their services differently. And obviously at some point public health orders will be lifted and we will return to what I call the next normal, because I don't think we're going to return to the way it was. But I think really the opportunity that's changed forever is the way that we utilize technology and the opportunity that provides. So, for example, we've been holding our council meetings virtually. So council has been joining us via Teams. We've had delegations join us via telephone and have conversations with council, and council's been able to continue those types of conversations. So I think those just give us more options as we move to, what that next normal is. So, down the road, I think we'll have more flexibility. We'll be able to do things in person, and I think a lot of people will want to do things in person maybe to a lesser degree until there's a comfort back in terms of how society feels about, gathering and interacting with folks. But it really does allow us to do a lot of things differently and a lot of things electronically. And, the good news is that as a City of Regina, we were ready. So, we had just undertaken the implementation of software to support our permits and our inspections. And because of our timing, COVID-19 shut our offices down, we were able to provide those services online, which is something that we were looking to achieve. And of course, COVID-19 just gave us an opportunity to accelerate it. So I think at this point, we're still exploring what has changed permanently, but I think the availability of technology and the opportunities around technology are going to change the way that we, deliver our services forever.
So, Chris, early in the pandemic response, the city decided to close facilities, prior to any public health orders coming out. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that decision was made and some of the factors that went into making that decision?
So that's a great question. Our council when this pandemic started, was very proactive in terms of wanting to make sure that the health and safety of this community was protected. So if you remember, Council wanted to declare our own state of emergency in our city, which, at the end of the day, the province overruled and said, no, we have the upper hand, and, we can't have individual communities creating their own states of emergency. But I think what that clearly demonstrated, it showed the province that, first of all, cities, and more than just Regina, but I think Regina as a leader said, you know what, we care about our people, and we care about our residents, we care about our employees. So we then started to take some very proactive approaches in terms of, if there's risk of contact, then we need to eliminate those opportunities where contact takes place. So we did make decisions to close some of our recreation facilities. We made decisions to, send employees home so they could work remotely. So our focus has always been from the very start, how do we protect our employees, their health and well-being, and then, of course, how do we, protect our clients, the citizens of Regina that interact with our staff and utilize our facilities.
Excellent. I'm just wondering, Chris, if you looked at your screen on the side there to the left, I think we've got about 20 questions coming in, which is excellent. And so we're just going to click on that, and awesome. Now, first question from one individual is really focused on has the city updated the number of people who can ride in the elevators at City Hall? And how do we plan to handle the large number of people moving in and out of the building, especially considering there's typically about 600 people who are currently working in City Hall?
So another great question. So we do have a reopen team that is looking at pretty much every element of our business and how we would return to normal. So, I mentioned that until the health order is lifted and the restrictions are lifted, we'll probably only be at 50% capacity. It'll take us a little while to get there. But we are exploring options in terms of staggered start times. So right now we have 2 people per elevator. And of course that can create some, restrictions obviously. But we will look at staggering start times and end times to obviously, alleviate or discourage that congestion. And then, of course, the other piece is that as we return people to City Hall, there's going to be declarations that people need to, go through in terms of, if we can all have confidence that the people that are coming in the back door of City Hall or they're going into our other buildings, that, they are declaring that I'm not feeling any symptoms. I haven't been in contact with anyone who has had symptoms. I haven't traveled. So, there'll be a process to declare so that we can all take some comfort in knowing that those people that are working alongside us don't have symptoms or don't have health concerns or issues. We're working through, obviously, where we're not able to maintain that 2-meter distance. What are the requirements we're putting in place around PPE and the wearing of masks, and whether or not that'll be a requirement or not a requirement. So lots of work left to do, but we will absolutely make sure that when we bring people back, we're not creating situations where, you can't avoid a larger gathering, and that could be 50 people standing in the foyer of City Hall waiting for an elevator. We're not going to put ourselves or yourselves in that situation. So we'll manage that.
Thanks, Chris. Next question is around the city's telework policy. So, of course, the city does have a telework policy. You talked a little bit about this earlier. The question really is around, if it's feasible for the work area, is it the city's intention to continue having employees permanently work from home?
So I touched on that a bit in my general comments. Obviously, we did have a telework policy prior to COVID-19, and to work from home, you had to make an application, and there were certain requirements in terms of the space in which you would work. There was some, ergonomics that needed to be in place. At the end of the day, whether you're working in City Hall, whether you're working, out at 4th Avenue or at the Transit Administrative Center, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're protecting your health and well-being. So there are some OH&S requirements. So we're definitely looking at those policies, and we'll need to make sure that, longer term, if people end up staying home or working remotely, that we're making sure that we're protecting and providing the necessary supports that you as an employee require. So more to come on that, and we need policy, obviously, because there's lots of people working from home, and I think there's lots of people that enjoy it. I've heard comments that I probably have the best work-life balance I've ever had. There is some flexibility, but it needs to be a decision of the organization in conjunction with the employee that it makes sense for that individual to return to work and be in the office environment, or a flexible schedule where there's some work from home and some work in the office, or a complete, this is a position where you could work remotely and there's no requirement to physically be in an office space.
Next question, Chris, is really around working in City Hall. So I know earlier you talked about it's probably going to take us until end of summer, beginning of September, until we have 50% of our employees returning to our admin offices. Are there any details around who is going to come back and when they're going to come back?
So what I can tell you is that those conversations are happening right now. So the Reopen team that I mentioned previously, they are having conversations with their directors right now, asking, okay, if we have the ability to bring people back into the office environment, what would that look like? And who would you need to put back in the office? And the priority, of course, is being, if there's a requirement to have some direct interaction, face-to-face, with a customer, then those are the people that obviously we're going to bring back first. So there is a plan, it is being worked out, and it will be communicated, obviously, to the employees as we get to a point where it's time to have those conversations. But I would hope as well that, as we're not going to be asking people to come back to work tomorrow without some conversations. So conversations between directors and managers and yourselves. This is a situation where, people respond differently. Some people are quite comfortable being in an office environment, in close proximity, and in close I still mean 2 meters away. Other people, have, compromised immune systems. Those people, obviously, they're going to stay at home. But others just, I feel safer at home. I don't feel a risk of exposure at home. So those are all things that we need to consider and balance as we make those decisions. And it's important that we kind of are prepared to have some give and take on both sides. So we may have employees that we ask to come back into the workplace, and really they would rather be at home. But in the same breath, your position means that we actually need you here. So those are conversations that we need to have. We're going to respect people's comfort level, and we'd also ask for understanding in terms of, at the end of the day, we have a business to run, and expectations of our community that we're able to provide those services.
Thanks, Chris. Next comment starts off as a kudos. So first of all, great job to everyone at the city. From frontline workers to ELT, response was quick and appropriate and went very smoothly. Just a shout out to DTI in terms of using technology to deploy people to work from home, but also introducing some opportunities that were on the back burner for a while. So the question really moves to how do you think the city will look in the future with new technologies, and so how will we approach that and use those?
So it's a great question, and I'm not sure anyone would have that answer right now. But, one of the things that we talked about as an organization when we went through a management review and some reorganizational changes it's well over a year ago now, was that we be a future-ready organization. And what does future-ready mean? Well, future-ready is not just about technology, although technology is a big piece of it. But, we know as a community that the community and our council, for example, want us to be 100% renewable by 2050. So environmental stewardship, environmental sustainability are really important to ourselves as an organization and our community. And those are things that are going to change the organization. So we're going to move to alternate fuel fleet vehicles, whether those are buses, whether those are electric lawnmowers, etc. So I think, there's so many opportunities as the world is advancing in terms of technology and, things that make us greener so that we're protecting the environment for, our children, our grandchildren, and their children. So we still have lots of work to do to kind of put a fence around exactly what that looks like for us. But I think as an organization, yes, we have to take a look at what we're doing and how we're delivering those services, and where we can use technology. We absolutely have to pursue that. And I think that's an expectation that residents have and this community has. And some of that is built around us being more efficient. As we move into a new budget year in 2021, we know that as a community, there are lots of businesses and lots of individuals that have been hit hard by this pandemic. People have been laid off. Business owners are having to close their doors. So there's going to be an expectation that as a community, there's been lots of federal support and I think provincial support to ensure that businesses can kind of, carry through this and weather the storm. But the reality is not everyone will be able to. So that puts more pressure on us as a municipality. Ultimately, the mill rate is what is our majority of our revenue. So we're going to have to be very proactive in terms of looking for opportunities to be more efficient, to deliver our services differently. And that's something that we've worked very hard as an organization over the last number of years. I mean, every time we go in front of the council at budget time, we always highlight our contribution to basically demonstrate to the community that we understand and that we will play our part. And I think the last number in front of council was, we've reduced our expenses by over $15 million in the past 2 to 3 years. So I think that's something that we should celebrate and feel good about. But there's going to be a continued expectation that we move in that direction.
Thanks, Chris. Next question is about masks. So earlier this week, the public health officer did change some restrictions, and those in restaurants are now required to wear masks. When we come back to the office, will we, as city employees, be asked to wear masks?
So that's another piece that, our health and wellness folks in our people and organizational culture area are constantly looking at. What are the requirements in, the public health orders and the Reopen Saskatchewan plan? So if we're putting people in an environment where there's less than 2 meters in terms of being able to physical distance, then obviously we need to provide masks, and those masks will be provided. I think the latest advice from the public health officer, Dr. Shahab, was that we should all have about 5 masks. And those are the cloth masks that you can reuse. And his advice is you should carry one with you at all times. I know now that I carry one in my car all the time. And depending on where you're going, sometimes you have to put that on. So it'll always be an option for people to choose to wear a mask. People will not be required to wear a mask in all instances within the workplace, but no one will be told they can't. And definitely where we, where there's risk or there's concern, then those masks will be made available by us.
So, Brenda, some municipalities and provincial governments in other places in Canada, specifically Nova Scotia and BC, are thinking about, in some cases, starting pilot projects related to 4-day work weeks. has there been any thought to 4-day work weeks with the city? And of course, that with those pilot projects, there are a number of notable benefits, including increased employee productivity, satisfaction, ability to stagger work shifts, etc. So just wondering if you could comment on that, Chris.
So, I mean, there have been conversations across the country about alternate work schedules. Obviously, the 4-day work week is something that has been talked about, by the Prime Minister. We haven't, as of yet, talked about that within the city, but I think that is one of the opportunities that we're going to have to explore. So what would that look like? What are the benefits of it? I mean, you've highlighted some of those in the question itself. So it's on our radar, but we haven't taken any concrete steps at this point. But I think as we move into the future, we're going to have to challenge ourselves to look and say, how do we respond to this? And, are there ways that we can, adjust our work schedules, our work hours, that provides opportunities for our employees to have, better work-life balance, better lifestyles. And I think, everyone has learned through this, and I think there will be some expectation that, like I say, I refer to that next normal. We're not going to go back to the way it was. Things are going to look different. We just need to take the time to have the conversation so we understand what works for our organization.
Thanks, Chris. Another question has come in around general public. So for field workers and our crews working in the field, they've been approached quite often by members of the public, not understanding that the work they're doing and what that means in terms of having to provide services. So just wondering if there would have been an opportunity for senior management, executive, maybe to talk a little bit more to the public about the services that we're continuing to provide on a daily basis and how we're doing that following the restrictions provided by the public health officer.
Yeah, that's another really good question. At the start of the pandemic, the mayor and myself had regular media events where we talked about the impact on the community. I spoke more about, the impact on the organization. So I think we tried as much as possible to actually make the community aware of, the challenge that this had not only in our community but on our organization, and the fact that we had so many employees that were still delivering frontline service, and we're still out there, definitely putting yourself at some risk in terms of there was lots of uncertainty at the start. We didn't know what transmission rates were going to look like. We didn't know how aggressive, we were going to have confirmed cases. So I know there was a lot of uncertainty at the start, and I know that the mayor and myself, as often as we were able, applauded the efforts of our staff, and I guess gave some recognition for your efforts. Could we have done that more? Absolutely. I know that, I did a video myself that, thanked employees, and I did one internally and I did one externally. But I also know, and I've heard it, that, there are certain sectors of employees that just feel like there wasn't enough recognition and appreciation for the challenging environment in which some of our frontline staff worked. So I acknowledge that. And again, I can't say enough about how much I appreciate and value the commitment and the risk that so many people accepted. And I know that, you're out there doing your job. But people continue to show up to work each and every day, and at times I know that people would have felt uncomfortable. So I can't say enough in terms of job well done, and hopefully we can manage as a community so we don't end up back in a situation where we're taking a step backwards. Hopefully we're making progress and we're moving in a positive direction as a community to get to that next normal.
Thanks, Thanks, Chris. I do know we're coming to the end of our time. It's about 1:45. We have 6 questions left. Would you like to, do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Let's get through.
Excellent. We've heard a lot in the media about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health. Just wondering what your thoughts are and what supports are available to employees.
So, yeah, that's a concerning question, and not the question is concerning. It's that, the mental health, the physical well-being of, our employees, residents of our community, people across the country. This has been a real challenge for folks, and for those folks that are in, a vulnerable position, it's been very hard on people, I think, and. The city has done some great work working with community organizations to support vulnerable populations. We've done all kinds of things like, meal programs and supports with a number of agencies. As an organization, we have one of the strongest employee family assistance programs in Regina. If you talk to your friends, you talk to people that work in other organizations, there are usually restrictions and limits around, counseling sessions and costs and everything else. As an organization, we promote the fact that we have a very strong EFAP program. We educate and refer people often, and we have really no restrictions in terms of the level of support that you as an employee or your family would require. So we've been encouraging all through this that people take care of themselves, they take care of their physical health, their mental health, and that we take the time to make sure that our colleagues are doing okay as well. We all hear stories, very unfortunate stories, where something happens to an individual, and employees talk the next day about, I'm not sure. I thought that individual wasn't looking themselves, or. So it's really important that we take care of ourselves, we take care of our family, but that we take care of each other, and that we check in on each other and support each other. So I feel really good about those programs that we have in this organization. And if there's folks that don't know about it, then by all means they should talk to their supervisor. They should talk to our people in our culture, and they can go to our City Connect website. There's lots of information. And we will support everyone who needs any assistance of any kind.
Thanks, Chris. There are 4 questions that kind of fit into that working from home bucket. So I'm going to throw them to you really quickly here. So the first one is, when it comes to working from home in the future, would casual employees who have been able to work from home during this time period be eligible to work from home? So that's the first one. The second one, are we looking at online learning opportunities? And then the third question is related to parking fees and travel policies when it comes to vehicle reimbursement. So are we looking at updating those with folks working at home?
Okay, you put 4 things together and you expect me to remember. So the working from home for our casual staff, I don't think it really matters whether you're permanent, whether you're a term employee, whether you're a casual employee. When we do an assessment of the work that you do and, what's the nature of your work, what are the functions that you perform, if we can perform those remotely, then I think that's a conversation that we need to have. The question around, education and training, what's interesting is, obviously, due to COVID, a lot of training that required travel was obviously canceled. Some training has continued, so the providers of that training have just altered their approach. So, many consultants, for example, that used to travel and provide training and courses, they're now providing those virtually and online. So, obviously, we're not going to lift travel restrictions around training until the public health order enables that, and then we'll have to look at our fiscal ability to be able to support those types of things. So definitely virtual training and learning opportunities are something that I think are just going to be the norm as we come out of the pandemic, at least for the short to medium term. There was a question about parking. So that's an interesting one. I know that, of course, employees that had a parking spot at City Hall or they were paying parking at one of our off-site locations, whether that's 4th Avenue, etc., that we kept those fees in place. If we make a decision that someone, for example, is going to have the ability to continue to work remotely, then obviously we'd have to revisit that. So part of it was, there was uncertainty as to how long this is actually going to be in place. So, we just said, well, you know what, we'll leave it in place for now. But obviously, if this continues for an extended period, or if we make decisions that people no longer have to return to the office, then we will have to revisit those policies.
Excellent. I think that was it, Chris.
Okay.
One question very specific about the gala. Do you think the employee gala will be held in January? And then after that, there's one final question.
So that is a great question. So, the gala, it will really depend on the ability in terms of the gatherings. So we've heard the chief medical officer say that phase 5 of the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, which is really around lifting that restriction and allowing public gatherings with a fairly large number. They actually talked about that not maybe happening until June of 2021. So the traditional gala that we've had over the last number of years, if my crystal ball says it's unlikely that would occur, but I think that means that then we need to get creative in terms of, is there a different way to do it? So, for all the grads that didn't happen, whether it was, grade 8 elementary or grade 12 high school graduations, it's about being creative to try to find something that allows a celebration and an opportunity for recognition and acknowledgement. But it's happening in a very different and unique way. So it may be that it doesn't happen, and we'll have to get creative in terms of what that next opportunity would look like.
Last question. Over the last 100 days, what have you learned about our organization and our team?
So, the learning for me is how we've been able to come together and collaborate with each other. So, we have a principle called One City, One Team. Our values are accountability, respect, and collaboration. And honestly, we're a fairly large organization, and I know that, we can be criticized for being a bureaucracy at times, and I'm sure at times we are. But I believe that we have had teams come together. We've had people look for creative ways to do their business. We've continued to deliver programs and services, for the most part, in their entirety, unless we made a conscious decision to stop something. And I think we should all feel proud. I feel really proud of our organization and the ability that we have had to, react fairly quickly, take on a lot of new and additional responsibility, and continue to deliver the programs and services that our citizens expect. So for me, I don't know if I learned that, because I've always felt that about the organization, but it's come clear in spades in terms of the quality of the individuals we have that work for the city, the integrity and care we bring to our jobs each and every day. So next time you see a colleague, take time to celebrate and thank each other for the work that you do, because we're making a difference in this community. We're making our community better, and we should all feel proud. I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and happy Canada Day next week.